Welcome back. Today's conversation is something that I'm super interested in, away from my career and away from self-development, but I think it plays a fundamental role in every area of life, and that's better understanding human behavior. To do so, I'm joined by an expert in that space and a best-selling author, Thomas Erikson. Thomas, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
And I guess my entry to your work, Thomas, was the book Surrounded by Idiots. And that's quite an upfront, aggressive title, I suppose, if you were to read that initially. Where did that come from?
Well, I've heard lots of comments about the title, and of course, it's a bit provocative. I understand that, which is kind of the point, as I think it's a good market uh, thing also to have something to stand out. But I mean, who hasn't, who haven't felt surrounded by idiots sometime in your life? I stole it's a take I took from an entrepreneur I helped several years ago who was surrounded by idiots. I was a management consultant, and he said, "Idiots over here, idiots or over there, idiots everywhere." And I asked him. The only question I could come up with was, "Who brought in all the idiots?" And that was that. Meeting's over. He actually kicked me out. It has never happened before or after. So that's a beautiful story. And the expression "surrounded by idiots" that kind of stuck with me. So when I actually put the book together, I thought maybe I should use this. And I was a published author, if I may just tell you, 30 seconds. I was a published author before I wrote thrillers, actually, about the behaviorist using four colors to help the police, like a mentalist or a profiler. And so when I put Surrounded by Idiots together, I went to my publishing company and said, "Hey, this is a great book about behaviors." And they said, "Oh, no, what is this? You should write thrillers, do that instead." And I said, "No, this is a title, and this is how it's going to look. It's my own design, the cover." And they said, "It's a stupid title. It's an ugly cover. Go away and write thrillers. Nobody's interested in that stuff." This actually, so I was shopping around finding a publishing house, but I couldn't. So I had to publish it myself in Sweden back in 2014. So it didn't start off really good, did
Yeah,
it?
and it's only in recent
So
years it's translated to English. It would have been 2019 that I got my hands on it.
that is probably correct. Yeah, I think so. I think so.
But that phrase "surrounded by idiots" obviously stuck with you during that meeting with that entrepreneur who didn't take too kindly to the fact that you pointed out that, of course, he was the one that managed to surround himself with idiots because he had a lot of control over hiring and firing, I guess. So that's, like you say, quite a provocative title. But it's interesting you mentioned that you were writing thrillers before this book when it came to understanding the different personality types. What
Yeah.
triggered your interest in that area then?
Behaviors whatsoever. Well, it's actually it goes back to when I, at the age of 24, got my first managing position at a bank office here in Sweden. I was a good sales guy, and so I went in and said, "Take me, I can do this." And they, for some reason, they actually believed me, which was a bad decision on their part. Uh, because it's different job. To selling is one thing, to lead is another thing. They are connected because it's about communication, but it's not the same job being a specialist or being a manager. It's not the same job. And after 8 or 10 months, maybe I messed everything up. It's a horrible story. I messed it up badly. You cannot imagine. It was a painful experience. So I went to my boss's boss, 2 levels up, and said, "You have to take me out of this equation. I don't know what I'm doing." And he said, "You better stay put, son, because your boss is even worse than you. He is not even here." And that is also a true story. And after a year, I managed to sort of take myself from there, and I ended. And in the meeting, when you leave a job, you sit down around the coffee table and you have a piece of cake, and somebody says something to you, "Good luck on your next step in your career," and whatever, and give you a present. I didn't get anything. I gave them a plant and said, "I'm sorry. I'm sorry." And one lady, she felt so bad about me. So at the end of the meeting, she said something like, "Well, you got a little better at the end, and it was
Oh,
horrible. It
wow.
was horrible." And then the HR department called me up and said, "Would you like to have this personality analysis assessment made? How about learning more about yourself?" And I said, "Okay." And I did a disc analysis, and I got the document in my hand, and I said, "Jesus Christ, this is bad news. Is this what you see when you meet me?" And she said, "Mm-hmm.
Did it feel correct to you, Thomas, or was it triggering?
Oh, it was 100% correct. 100% correct. I never backed away from bad news or negative feedback. That's not the point. But my self-awareness was really low, really, really low. I didn't consider myself in any way. I didn't think about what I did or what I didn't do or what I said or what I didn't say. I just was sort of in my own head, trying to be all over the place at the same time. So that was a starting point. And she said, would you like to talk about it? I said, I better, right? So that was my introduction to profiling whatsoever and actually learning more about who I was.
A bit of a rude awakening, though, I suppose. But I think you do yourself a little bit of a disservice when you said you didn't have self-awareness, because you had the self-awareness to know that the management position maybe wasn't working out for you, but maybe you didn't have the tools to understand why. And then when the HR person gives you a personality test, you then have the raw facts and the data in front of you based on who you are.
Let's put it that way. That sounded much better on my behalf. No, but seriously, and this was not my aha moment. It was more like a oh no moment. I'm doing really, really bad. Is this how I am acting? And because it was 100% correct. And so there I started working on myself. And when I went back to a managing position after a couple of years, it went much, much better. All of a sudden, I learned how to listen and how to keep my own mouth shut. To be honest, I talked too much before. When I was younger, I had something to say on each and every topic you could just imagine, and I was in my own head basically. It wasn't beautiful. So I've been struggling since then, learning more and more about it. These days, my self-awareness, my insight of who I really am, are quite high. But of course, there are some blind fields still there somewhere. Problem is, I don't know which they are. If I knew, I would try to sort of sketch them.
Of course,
to myself.
and I think even when you do have self-awareness, your natural tendencies will creep in sometimes at moments of particular high stress, where you're not able to create that mindfulness gap in terms of stimulus, and then how should I react based on the person that I'm trying to be or the improvements I'm trying to make. It just automatically comes in the kind of chimp brain, so to speak, if we were to borrow from the chimp paradox.
Yes, that's true. We have a natural style to behave, to act. We have our personalities, and that's okay. That's fine. You have to work on yourself. You have to develop where you're really weak when it comes to, I don't know, procrastination or hating details or talking too much or being scared of talking to strangers or whatever it might be. Could be anything, I guess. You have to work on those things, but you can't stray away too far from who you really are. You should never violate your own personality, because that's bad. It's going to give you stress-related illnesses, physical ones. Seriously, there's some really serious signs on this. So you can pretend in a meeting. You can sort of act and put on a mask. But the problem is, you can't be good at everything together with everyone all the time. When people say you can be anything you want in life, well, actually you can't. That's actually a myth. It's a beautiful thought, but it's not true.
Yeah, I certainly agree with that.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think you can be adaptable, but to go against yourself on a regular basis would generate burnout. It'd be exhausting to put up this persona which you cannot maintain. And we'll definitely get on to some of the personality testing that I've done in recent weeks and seen what my colleagues' results have been like as well. But all of that was based on the DISC personality method, which I would love to explore with you and just get a bit of an overview for those that aren't acquainted with it.
Okay, so the basics are, it's a 2x2 matrix. You have extroversion, it's a narrow picture: extroversion, introversion, task orientation, people orientation. So you get 4 basic ingredients, which you of course can combine in 20,000 ways, obviously. So I'm not saying, as some people say, is there only 4 types of people? No, because you can sort of mix it in different ways. But you had the red factor, the dominant factor. You have those who are, very task-oriented, very fast-forward, decisive, competitive, a bit harsh to their surroundings, boom, boom, like this. Speed up. We're in a hurry. Well, we're not in a hurry, but we could speed up anyway, because your life is short. Let's get going here, bam, 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 like this. And then you have the yellow type, who are also extroverted, but sort of people-oriented. So they smile a lot, they see the sun is shining everywhere. And even though you say, well, it's actually raining, well, the sun is always shining somewhere, isn't it? It's a lovely life. Hooray, let's play opera, and sing. And they are visionary thinkers, and they are super creative. Some of them haven't touched ground since, I don't know, late 90s or something. They can solve problems you have never heard of. They answer questions nobody has asked. And then you have the other person-oriented profile, which is the green one, who is introverted. So they are more calm, more to them, keep themselves to themselves, caring, very sharing, excellent listeners. They actually hear what you say. And you know what? They will remember what you told them, especially if it was something negative. And if it was something negative about the green individual, the green person himself or herself, it's going to be filed here on shelf 1A for eternity. But they won't tell you, because they conflict avert, so they just do this. And you will ask, are we good? I'm sensing a bit frostiness here. No. Everything is fine, This is what's going to happen. No conflict. So we have to go to body language and facial expressions. And then you have, of course, the blue type, which is a task-oriented introvert, which gives you, well, an engineer or an accountant. Detail-focused facts, proof. Can you prove this? How do you know? Well, I read the book. In which language? Well, English. Well, it's written by a German guy. Do you have it in the original? Well, you don't read German. Yeah, I can do Google Translate, because there are some translational errors. It's been known to happen. So they need to go back to basics and dig themselves to the groundwater all the time. So those are the basic ingredients in the DISC profile. And then you can add, of course, the combinations, and you can add the drivers, the motivators. You can add where you are in the line of siblings. Are you the oldest son or the youngest daughter? Or lots of stuff,
Other factors come into play, as you said, but that's a really helpful overview into those four. And you mentioned throughout this that there are combinations, but which of these are the most common that we see?
The most common, well, statistically, there are lots of data on this. The most common combination, I don't know, the green profile is the most common profile. In our part of the world, let's say the industrialized world, let's call it, we have about 40, I think it's 47, 48% people with most green in their color. Doesn't mean they are only green. So green with some kind of combo, green and blue or green and yellow, usually. Green and red is actually very, very unusual. I had a guy on in a coaching session this morning from Australia. He was equally green and yellow. I said, "You're kind of stressed, aren't you?" "I sure am," he said, because really contradicting forces within the same individual. He was really struggling. But green and something would be the most common combination. Definitely.
Yes,
so.
I find that interesting. And when I've done the personality test, so I did them through a company called Insights Discovery that uses this method, and it linked in really nicely to the work that I've read from yourself.
Yeah.
I find some people try to be other traits. So a lot of people try to be more red, because red, as you explain in your book, is quite commonly associated with leadership positions. And
True.
when you were talking about moving as a 24-year-old into a quite a high level management position, which you felt was kind of beyond you at that stage, you naturally, I believe, from reading your book, are more red inclined. But some people who would maybe move into a position that they're maybe not comfortable with initially would perhaps try and play up to their red traits, because that's the dominance and the directorship and the leadership that they feel they need to show. So I find it interesting that a lot of the population are typically green dominant. However, I think a lot of people try and play up to their red traits to meet the persona that they think they need to have.
That's spot on. Definitely, because the most common color people claim to be without being it is actually red. And I have noticed this for, I don't know, 20 years or something. People say, "Well, I'm kind of red, I'm very red, I'm very decisive, and then they look like scared. I don't know, but it's a bit. It's. I don't think it's about the dominance part. I think it's about, maybe you say this is a natural born leader, which is interesting, because I am not saying red people are the best leaders. I am certainly not saying that, because they can step on people's toes better than anyone, and they can be really harsh and tough and give you cruel feedback if they are in a bad mood. So red is good sometimes, and sometimes it's actually really, really the worst you can imagine. So, which of course goes for all the profiles, obviously. But people likes to be red because it makes them look stronger, I guess. And red people are strong. They have big egos. They are strong. They have a strong inner drive. They accomplish things because they never sit still. They never. I mean, thought and action is the same thing in the red mind. So when a yellow person is talking about what he's supposed to do or be doing, or maybe should think of eventually planning, or who knows, and the green one is saying, oh, that's a lot of work, I don't know, I can be a follower, which is okay. There's nothing wrong with that either. And the blue one says, I'm going to plan myself into the year of 3000, and then I'm going to act. Maybe, we'll see. And the red guy, he's sort of up and running since a week back, and therefore they get a lot of things done. So you notice the red people actually more. And that is interesting because the red people are the least common color. 9.5%, something like that, has mostly red in their profile. And only red people is only 0.5%, because only 5% of the population has one color. My wife is one of those. She has red and only red and nothing else. And then she's a woman, which makes it even more unique. And she said, you better remember that when birthday comes up, she says, I'm very unique, so go away. Buy me some expensive stone or some kind.
I was going to ask this. Is there a gender divide? So reds are typically, of the 9.5% of the population that are red, more of them are male than female. I understand that. I think you can see that in a lot of personality types. Although famously, Britain's first female Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, was probably considered red.
I would say that, yes.
Which a lot of people would probably recognize those qualities in her behavior versus maybe more masculine counterparts.
It's a tricky path to step into, because there are some a lot of people don't like when I or somebody else in my field points out the gender differences. And I understand it's a delicate issue. I totally respect that. And I'm not saying to anybody who's listening if it's a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not here to discuss that. The sort of the gender issue is not my field. I have never made any research in these differences. But statistically, that's all I'm saying. The American university, I forgot the name now, made an assessment in 2013, I believe it was, and they estimated about 50 million disk analysis has been conducted all over the planet in 49 different languages. So there are some data to lean back on here. And the thing is, there are more male red people than there are female red people. There are more yellow women than there are yellow men. There are more green women than there are green men. And there are more blue men than there are blue women, which gives us the notion that men are more task-oriented, like, things, gadgets, toys, cars, tools, things that makes noises and such. And women are more interested in people. Right. The difference isn't huge. There's a huge overlap, I would say. But if you were guessing, if you take a number of 100 people and you should point out the most task-oriented person in the room, and you pointed at a man, you would be right 60% of the time. If you pointed at a woman, you would be right 40% of the time. So there's a huge overlap, obviously. And the similarities are much, much bigger. But there are some differences. If that's good or bad, I really don't know. But it's true that you say that the red factor, as it is more of a dominant factor, and like this, and bam, follow me, I'm here now. Let's bring everybody down and let's conquer the world. It's considered kind of a male trait, which I think it's true to some extent. Women are maybe, it's a cultural issue as well, because women are maybe not allowed to act in that way as a man is. But that's a cultural thing. I think that I think is bad. It should be like that.
I would agree with you, because it's considered masculine to be dominant within an environment like that.
Yeah.
There are so many different factors at play, and one of the terms that you used was driver, because you can have, let's say, for example, I am typically red blue, but my drivers may not push me towards leadership. And you actually mentioned about sales performance. That's the area that I work in. And I've never been somebody that's been massively interested in managing other salespeople. I like to hit my own targets and progress my own things. I don't mind coaching and sharing like what I'm up to in terms of my email approach, my cold calling, my proposals and presentations. But I've never been one that wants to do people's one-to-ones and the reviews and do all the other work around that. And I think if my drivers were different as a red-blue, I would be more prone to management. But I'd love to go into drivers and just what role they play when some of these colors are the way they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are several drivers, a lot of drivers, but when it comes to the workplace, I would say there are 6 or maybe 7 that actually affects how you are acting. Because when the colors explains how you act, the drivers explains why you act the way you do. Why are you choosing a red behavior in this very situation instead of just sitting down and waiting to see what's going to happen? And that could be sort of driven by your what's called workplace motivators. Some people are theoretical people. They like to learn new stuff. It's the strive for knowledge, let's say. And not necessarily useful knowledge, but just knowledge, reading a book or watching a TED Talk because it was interesting. Can't use it for anything, but it's, kind of interesting. So they can entertain during the next party to talk about the monkeys in Tasmania or something because they saw the video on YouTube. So it's sort of filing everything back to somewhere. It could be interesting, but it can't use it for anything. But theoretical driver. Then you have something called the practical economical driver, which is about result. It could be about money. It can also be about time. Really time efficient people, good at time management, have this driver really strong because they need they can't leave one room to go into another room without bringing something with them because that's a waste of steps, I guess.
Resource, time.
Yeah. Exactly. And a lot of leaders have that driver as well because they need to see result. Result is everything. They would never invest 1 hour if they don't know what the comeback will be. Will I get anything from this? Will I benefit from doing this or that? If you're lacking that driver, then you actually can work really hard just, for no reason at all because it's fun. There's nothing wrong with that either. I'm only pointing out the differences here. Then you have the let's say the creative style, the self-fulfillment driver, which is about finding harmony in life, working on yourself. You could be an artist, could be something else. It doesn't have to be a painter or anything, but you are usually kind of creative, regardless of the colors. Then you have a social driver. Oh, I'm talking so much. Social driver, which means taking social responsibility. It's nothing about being socializing, but taking social responsibility. You like to help people. Usually, that's the only connection we can see with the colors. That a lot of green people, 50% of the greens, have a social driver as well. That's the only statistical proven connection we can see. Otherwise, there is none. Then you have the individualistic type, which is about power. Here you find lots of leaders. Power, influence. I'll make the decision. I own the agenda, the questions, the meeting, everything, and you follow me, regardless if you're red, yellow, green, or blue, actually. So that is more what you should look for when it comes to leadership. Somebody who's willing to put their own face out there and maybe get a smack on the head because they're willing to take some risks also.
Yeah.
And then you have, sorry.
I was just saying that's vitally important that rather than just looking at somebody's personality test, you're looking at what sits underneath it to push them in the right direction. Because you could have somebody who's very prone to that leadership who is a yellow, but if you eliminate them because they're not red, then you miss the opportunity for them to be a manager.
Exactly. And there's a downside to it as well, because influential people, they like to be in charge of everything. So they sort of put their nose into everything. So they start to micro. If you have a blue person with the individualistic driver, then you have a micromanager. And that's the worst case scenario, all categories. That's the worst you can find yourself in. But anyways, and the last one is, of course, the traditional driver. 50 years ago, they called it a religious driver, which tells you a little bit what it is. It's about spirituality and you have strong fundamental values. I would maybe call it philosophical, let's say. You're interested in bigger questions like where is the society going? How can we sort of work on the climate issue.
Let's
These
tackle
really
the bigger
big
problems in
things.
life. Like they dream very big and they consider the philosophical questions around lifestyle.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So that's those basics. And you can combine colors and drivers, and all of a sudden you have quite an extensive roadmap. But it still only helps you to ask the right questions, because the most simple-minded hobo or homeless person is more complicated than we can put in a piece of paper. So we have to remember that also. The human mind is super complex. That's the way it is.
Undoubtedly. And I think acknowledging those drivers alongside your personality colors are vital, because you can't just shoehorn yourself into one particular area based on your colors. You need to understand what's pushing you in those directions as well, where you may be predisposed to certain behaviors or certain positions. And I think it's interesting, we've talked about reds as leaders. Blue, I think you mentioned things like accountant. Like in my day job, a lot of the people that are blue within my company work in like stock and management of operations and processes. They very much fall into that area. Yellows, I guess, the fantastic networkers and people that are very, very good at meeting other people and getting acquainted with them. What are greens typically? What kind of roles or jobs do they fall into, Thomas?
Okay, it's a risky question to answer, because and again, there's a disclaimer here, actually, because I just have to. Green people are natural helpers. They are, and they're really good at this. The nice and very, let's say, the pleasant thing with the greens is that they don't want to be in the center of things. They don't want to take any heat, and they are conflict avert, and they don't like to get into an argument. So they kind of play sort of some by role in a way, and they're absolutely willing to be a part of a group, not too big, 5 to 6 people. Otherwise, there's a crowd, 6 people. That's a crowd, right? There's a huge mass of people. But they are willing to do repetitive work, and they are willing to do the grinding that sort of annoys the red ones and bores the yellow ones and makes the blue ones find all the faults and flaws in the process and whatever. And the green ones, they are okay with taking an order and saying, okay, I'm going to do this for 9 months now. That's okay. I'm good with it. I'm good by that. Let's just tell me what to do and I'll do it, because they don't want the responsibility all the time. It's a generalization. I understand that, and everybody who sees this can understand that. But it's a kind of they don't want to take responsibility for the bigger issues. They don't want that, even though their drivers might tell them otherwise. But it's scary, because that's about a behavior, putting yourself stepping up on a box, and shouting to everybody, "Hey, come over here and listen to me. I have this great idea." That's not a green behavior. They might do it under gun threat, but they won't do it voluntarily, I would say. It's more of an extrovert thing.
Yes,
But they're good at,
the S in disc, Thomas, that relates to them can stand for stability or steadiness. So I think that certainly points to that, doesn't it, in terms of.
Yes, and they like to know where they are going. They want to know how things are going to be in the future, and the future could be far away, and because they don't like changes. Changes is the worst thing, because it actually was better before. And it was better before. It was sunnier, cheaper. Everybody was happier. And like somebody, I was giving a lecture in Berlin, in a German movie theater a couple of months ago, and I actually said that on stage in front of 1,500 people. It was better before, as kind of a joke, just to see what happened, because it's such a cliche. And one guy shouted way in the back. It was completely dark, couldn't see him. He said, "Hey, I don't know if it was better before, but I do know it's worse now." So what are you going to do with that kind of comment? I couldn't see him. It's kind of a heckler, I guess. I don't know. But anyways, but they like to do repetitive stuff. They love to see things as it was the previous week and the previous month, and hopefully last year, and so on. And they're good at it. They're really good at it. They're loyal and trustworthy.
Steady and loyal and trustworthy. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So,
how do our colors change over time? Can they adapt over time? Like, what might trigger a change in my red blue?
That's a great question. When if you go back to Marston, who came up with the disc basics, let's call it, which afterwards developed into the vector analysis by Clark and so on. But Marston was a psychologist, and he said that at the age of 23, you don't change anymore. And why 23? That's a strange number, isn't it? I believe what he meant was when you're a grown-up, your personality gets kind of fixed. So you can change and adapt and sort of form yourself and get formed by others, by your parents, obviously, how they parent you, and by your first, high school, university, and first job maybe. But then you reach a situation where you don't develop your character anymore, and then you get this fixed personality. Then you need to work really hard on yourself in order to change even further, regardless of where you find yourself as an individual. And I believe there is some truth to that. I never, as I mentioned in the beginning of this conversation, I never, let's say, pondered who I am until I was 24, to be honest. And then I realized, I was talking too much and I didn't listen, and lots of other very unpleasant things to say. And I have to sort of not reprogram who I am. I am still that kind of guy in a way, but I'm more balanced now. I had to work really hard on myself, and I still do. But I think it's worth it. I definitely think it's worth it, because, I mean, there's a huge world out there, and there's so many things that you can do, and not working on yourself at all, that's bad.
Yeah.
Again, your mother was wrong. You can't be everything you like, but you can be bloody well much more than you are today if you work on it.
Exactly.
You have to do something.
Anyone that chooses to listen to a podcast that focuses on self-development is completely in agreement with you, Thomas. But I think, like you say, there are some fixed traits about yourself and within your personality that kind of embed themselves up to the age of 23, and then thereafter they're very hard to make those small adjustments. But although they're painful, they're definitely worth doing if you can just direct yourself forward. I wonder, which colours come into conflict with each other most? You mentioned a few examples. For example, the greens would be very happy just plodding along, doing the same thing and ticking off the boxes. But the blue might look at the process that they're doing and think, no, we need to look into this more and understand how we can do this process better, and almost stop them taking action and doing things to allow them to then change the plan and change the strategy. What other colours come into conflict?
The blues are kind of cool that way. The way is everything. The goal is nothing. The process, it's that's all what it is. Well, it isn't, but still. Well, to begin, the short answer is reds and anyone, including other reds, because they create conflict all the time. Not that they care, because conflicts and shouting and argumenting about stuff is just another way of communicating. Well, the obvious clashes is between reds and greens, because they are very contradictory, like this. But the hardest one is actually yellow and blue, because yellow and blue, they are sort of standing in different universes. The blue ones have this historical perspective, what happened over there, analytical, what happened over there back then, what can we learn from that? And the yellows are sort of, they are in the future, way past everybody else, in long way back down the road in the future somewhere, visualizing something. And the blue ones, they love detailing everything and be really, really precise. The yellow ones open the lid in the front and out comes, well, who knows? And details and facts, ew, excess spreadsheets, ew, disgusting. And the blue ones, ooh, fantastic. Can you see all the data in here? Exactly, they love it. And the yellow ones hate it. The yellow ones, they are spontaneous. And the blue ones sometimes not even answer a straightforward question. You can see all the emotions on the outside of the yellow one. You can see if they're sad or happy or confused. The blue ones are sort of stone-faced all the time. So they are really, really not connected at all. And the greatest clashes comes from there. And the yellow ones, they can usually feel that. So they try to charm the blue guy, which is actually an impossible mission. Don't ever try that, because they will see through you just like that.
Yeah,
you can't trick a blue one, because he will remember what you said and he will take notes. and he will turn it towards. But you said on Monday, you said 23.9. Now you're saying 23 something. Which is it? You know, you have to be more precise. And so they can reach out to each other. They can meet each other in the chart, I guess, and come closer. But it takes an effort from both of them. None of them can reach the whole way like this. That's just no way to do it. You have to have both on the same time, saying we have to work on this. We have to work on our communication here, on our cooperation skills, or whatever it is, or our marriage for that matter.
Yeah, actually. I think when I've witnessed yellow and blue combine, one of the ways that blues would struggle with yellow's communication is a lack of detail or a lack of like respect for the analysis of what's needed, and instead relying on like being chatty, enthusiastic, and like directional in terms of let's just go forward, whereas the blue wants to know the nitty gritty details of exactly how it's all going to work. And equally, you mentioned as well that the yellow will be very confident and quite charming and like persuasive, but the blue might feel manipulated, as you said there, and they would remember, oh well, actually you told me something different to that, and to go back on that now is like it's like a breaking of trust. And interestingly, in my report that I got back, the blue element of me says, do not communicate with me, using like willy facts or like willy statements, because I'd much rather you dealt with me in the facts, and I'll be more able to be persuaded and led and agreeable if you can actually give me the data that would allow me to do so. And then the red elements of my personality is like, once I've got the data, I'm like, right, let's go, come on.
What are you waiting? What are you sitting there for? Exactly. That's just the way it is. It's not going to work really well. And I actually had this interesting experience after a lecture I gave in Sweden a couple of years ago. A couple in their, I would say, early 40s something. They came up to me, a man and a woman, so standing there, looked a bit cute together, if you know what I mean, a bit, yeah. And then they came up to me and said, yeah, excuse us. And so we just wanted to say hello. And I said, well, come up on stage, and let's have a chat. No. We just wanted to say thank you. And I said, well, what is it? Thank you for coming to the lecture. No, it's not that. It's because we are very different. We have been in and out of this relationship for 5 years, separating and coming back and, like this. And we couldn't understand why, because we kind of love each other, but we don't like each other. And I said, it's a very confusional thing to say. And I said, well, what's the solution? Well, after reading a book and listening to you now, obviously, we know I'm blue and she's yellow. We are in different universes. We understand that. But when you put it out there and we realize why we can't argue in a way that the other one is understanding, we realize, but if you push the right buttons, we can actually sort of meet somewhere in the middle, find some sort of middle ground and actually get somewhere, because we kind of love each other. So we would like to say thank you. Now we're getting married. And for me, it's kind of, hugging and on stage there was kind of cool. And it was actually the yellow and blue situation there, because everybody, both thought the other one was a complete idiot.
Yeah, so they were surrounded by an idiot that they're just about to spend.
Surrounded by an idiot. That's a new concept. Yeah, it's a relational thing, I guess.
It's interesting you give you said the male was blue and the female was yellow, because when I've dated yellow women, I noticed that they're more spontaneous, which is actually quite good for me, because I'm very routined and stable and steady, and I tick boxes off, and I like to stay within my habits. But sometimes you do need a little bit of like extroversion and like pushing you to do a few different activities and have new experiences. And that's actually a female quality. Even if they weren't yellow, females do tend to be more spontaneous than males. So I find it interesting that those two have come together and combined.
Yes. When it comes to relationships, I mean, romantic relationships, this story, that was a beautiful story. And I like to tell it because it touched me in a way, because I thought it was, well, they were so cute, this couple. But the thing is, I mean, opposites attract, right? Okay. But for how long? For how long are you, I mean, if you're attracted or sort of impressed by somebody with these personality features, these traits that you would like to have. Oh, he's so good at this, and she's so fantastic with that. Oh, I wish I was more like that. We complement each other, you say, or usually what you say. She's like my left arm, and I like her right arm, and well, anyways. But the thing is this, then you have to live together also, buy a car or buy a house or plan your vacation or raise a child with an idiot. I mean, here, this is going to put you really, this is going to stretch this relationship in many directions. My recommendation, because I get the question sometimes, what kind of partner should I look like? I don't think you should look for somebody who is your complete opposite. If you have no common grounds on sort of the basics, not only how you like your morning tea or your eggs or that thing. So, I mean, fundamental values, yes, fine, obviously. But still, if you are really, really different in your personality ways, let's say, every conversation, every day, it's going to be some kind of struggle, and it's gonna nag you, and it's gonna make everything really, really hard.
Death by a thousand cuts, Thomas. It'll just cut away and chip away, and it'll eventually be broken.
Yeah.
How can you spot some of these personality types? So obviously we're not all walking around with a disc test to get somebody to fill in and complete it. If I'm looking at my colleagues or maybe my customers, my clients, or even romantically, how can I make some assessments?
Go green. Go green yourself, meaning take a step backwards and listen and pay attention and observe them. Then you will see pretty quickly who this is. If it's a blue person, he or she will be even more quiet than you are. That gives you clues. Some people say there's nothing to analyze here. He doesn't say anything. He just sits there. Well, there's a lot of things to say about that. He's probably working to begin with, without distracting everybody else. But go green. Be a good listener. Be very observant to everybody else, and see what they are doing. The easy thing. I mean, the yellows those you're going to see, in 30 seconds time, because they can't ever be quiet for very long. So they would sort of reveal themselves, actually. And they are super charming, and they are easy to love because they are so positive, and they see sunshine where everybody else sees problem and such and some. But you're going to see it. The red person, you probably will. I would say the extroverted profiles are easier to spot, would be my guesstimate here, actually. But if it's a combination, well, go green, listen, pay attention, be observant, be an analyzer, really. But, just don't say anything unless they ask you questions. I realize the situation might vary here, and I write that I'm doing a presentation here. How can I judge that? Well, then you have to do some sort of pre-study of some kind, I guess. You can do that. You're smart. You can do that.
You can tell in a lot of ways. So I know some of my customers what color type they will be or how they are based on their email written style to me. So before I even meet them, I can tell quite quickly that this person's very red or this person's very blue. Or if they're telling about their weekend and they want to know about mine, or they want to know about my plans for the summer in terms of holidays, I know they're yellow. And greens are a little bit harder because they're maybe a bit more reserved and a bit quieter and a bit more stable. But you can tell a lot from how somebody types or texts or emails, or even how they are on the phone before you maybe interact in person.
You can count the number of exclamation marks in an email, or smileys in a text, or it's even in a business relationship. That's really interesting how yellow people text you when it comes to business. Anyways. Sorry. It's a good example.
Yeah, it's a really good way to tell what people's style's like. And I think that the other way you mentioned about yellows, you would quickly recognize them because in a group setting, they will be the center of attention and being very seen and loud and engaged. Is there a perfect combination that we look for when it comes to building like a harmonious team in terms of different colors? Because we wouldn't want them all to be the same. And you also mentioned, particularly romantically, you wouldn't want somebody who's a polar opposite and there's no cohesion whatsoever. What about building a team?
What about building a team? That is, of course, the right question. Well, it depends a little bit about the team leader, I would say. But diversity is always the best. It is always the best. I mean, usually, especially within sales, actually, when it comes to to finding sales reps. Usually the sales director has some yellow in him, and the sales manager is probably yellowish, and the team leader is yellow. So they are only recruiting yellow people because they understand yellow. Those are the good guys, because we recognize them. They're like us, we're really good people. So the sales team are usually up till, I mean, in my own statistics, in my own database, it's kind of 70% yellow in the sales force, which is not comparable to the population in that's kind of 23, 24 maybe. So there's an overrepresentation of yellow within sales, which is kind of understandable as they are excellent communicators. But the recruitment should go like this. You should find some red, somebody who is sort of driving things forward and challenging you a little bit. You have some inspiration in a couple of yellows. You need green people because you need the loyalty, you need the stability, the calm ones, and you need the blue ones who can help you point out a couple of mistakes over there and some flaws over there, And if you can lead all these characters, then you actually have a really good team. The challenge is to lead 4 types of individuals, or these combinations, then, as I mentioned before. But if you are good, if you have a strong self-awareness as a team leader, you can do it, but you have to work on it. You have to work on it, and you have to be observant of what's going to happen. And you have to see it, you have to spot the conflicts within the team also, and sort of deal with them. You can't just go away and make business. You have to stay put and sort of work on your leadership skills, obviously. That's crucial. But if you do it, you can have a really good team. I'm not saying you should have equally much of each and every color, because that's probably impossible. It depends on what your business is. If the team is supposed to deal, if the team is supposed to deal with people, well, then you need more yellow and green. If you're supposed to deal with, data or IT programming, then you probably need more blue, which is a no-brainer. But still, if you have only blue, it's going to be really quiet. It's going to be like a graveyard in there, like a cemetery.
They can seem a little bit aloof and almost rude, blue, because they are so much within the analysis and the information that they're trying to generate, and almost you can almost stigmatize them a little bit as pessimistic as well, which is it can be a negative in a team if somebody wants you to take a step back from pushing forward, particularly if you're a red leader or a yellow leader. You want to let's get moving, let's do this. And if a blue maybe puts the brakes on, it's actually very handy. I know I benefit from colleagues that have less red in them and more blue than me, who sometimes say, well, let's just look a little bit at how we do this. And I like getting into the detail with them. But then as soon as I'm convinced of the use case or the process, I'm just full steam ahead. Let's do this as hard as we can and as fast as we can to find out if it works or not. Because I think one of the negative aspects of a blue would be that they would maybe not take the action. They would want to just test and probe before actually exposing it to the real world.
Exactly. I've tested this, and I'm not the only one. Consultants all over the planet probably experimented with this, putting together a team consisting of only red people, or only yellow, only greens, only blues, and see what happens. And I've done that several times, and it's sort of an interesting case study, because nobody is succeeded with anything if everybody is the same. And it's fun to see in what way they fail. The Reds are shouting and yelling and giving each other orders. Nobody wants to do the work, but they're finished before everybody else. And then they solve another task because that was a stupid assignment anyway. And the Yellows are talking and discussing what they are supposed to do and how beautiful the result's going to be. But they sort of never get, over the finishing line. And the green ones, they look at each other, like this, and who's in charge here? I don't know, not me. And the blue ones, they are planning and Googling and analyzing. And it's fun to actually, that's also kind of a no-brainer. But when you see it in action, you realize if you're tilting too much towards any of the colors, you're going to mess it up completely. And it's fascinating to see how many actually really experienced leaders fall into this trap or pitfall, let's say, because they don't realize if they are recruiting the same guy over and over, you're going to get the same thing.
You think leaders have a bias towards recruiting their own color?
all people are biased all the time. It's impossible. What you need is a sort of a randomized computer-based process in order to not be biased in one way or another. There are some, I mean, that's why we use recruitment agencies to not fall into that pitfall, I guess. But if you are in charge of things, if you like somebody, it's hard to say, I'm not taking you, I'm taking somebody I like a bit less, actually, because I think it's going to do a better job, because you like people who are like you, because you're a good person. You are like you are because you think that's the right way to be. Otherwise, you would have been in some other kind of individual, I guess. So that's a bias. And I think it's impossible to sort of exclude it from the process. As soon as you put people, humans in the process, there's going to be some kind of bias. There's been some experimentation here in Sweden, taking out people's names or genders or age or anything to sort of only look at the resume. But it's hard. It's really, really hard. But then you also need to have a meeting or two to see who is this anyway. Writing the perfect resume or the sort of introduction letter, everybody can do that these days. The courses online.
I think people can also put forward their best self in 2, 3, 4 60-minute interviews. People can mask an awful lot about themselves. And I was saying to you before we hit record, I had recently got another personality test back from Insights Discovery, and it was interesting to see the final page was your conscious persona, and it was the percentages of red, blue, green, yellow that you had, and then there was your non-conscious persona, and they mapped out the percentage differences between that. And interestingly, my percentage was quite low because I took that to be that I'm quite authentic in work in terms of I act very similar to how I am. But I had some colleagues who were calling out differentials of 40, 50% in terms of their conscious and unconscious. Now, of course, they're asking you lots of different questions. So they're assessing how in the moment are you with these answers, and how much are you trying to answer a question a particular way to, maybe, as we said at the start, trying to be really red, because that's what I think is needed. I would find that exhausting if my difference was massive. I think I was like 13% difference between my conscious.
You bring up something really important. There's an important takeaway from this, and that is actually that if you try to be somebody else in an interview, or if you actually succeed in fooling everybody throughout the whole process and you get the job, I mean, like you're a baker and now you're flying 747s out of Heathrow. You know, that's a bad decision. Don't do that, because they will reveal you. They will sort of take down your pants at the end of the day and say, well, this is not who you told us that you are. Because if you are living like some sort of, you're trying to pretend, it's not going to work. And it sounds obvious when we talk about it. Everybody who's listening to this say, yeah, I knew that. But still we are trying to put some mask on and be add some additional politeness to things, or trying to look really good or whatever. But the thing is, sometimes we have to. It's a bit related to what we talked about earlier here. You are who you are, and that's kind of okay, I would say. If you're struggling, if you have some flaws and you have some obvious weaknesses, work on those. Don't neglect them, because neglect is a bad route. Don't step onto that path. But the thing is, you can't completely rewire yourself. You can't reprogram your brain, like some people say, or change your psychology. You can learn, you can develop, but you can't be another person. That is actually not possible, and you shouldn't, because there is a position for you somewhere. The trick is, especially in the beginning of your career, the trick is to find that position, to understand what it is. And the drivers can probably help you, because the drivers is where I find people in the wrong positions. Salespeople with no economical driver whatsoever. They are living on sort of crumbles from the super sales guys in the company. They are sort of, but they don't have that drive, for they don't want to make money.
They're not fussed about their bonus. Yeah, if you ask them like, what's your why, they wouldn't say, because I want to buy this particular house or this particular car, which a lot of good salespeople that I've worked with, when you delve under their why, a lot of the time is, I want to have this amount of money by this age so I can do this and this. So I find that a vital point there, because they could be the most yellow or red or whatever combination of things we want from a good salesperson. But if their driver isn't economical, then it's
Well, they're probably not going to sell as good as the competitor, who has some sort of incentive going on for him there. And again, I am not putting a value on all of this. I'm only saying the differences that you may have towards other people, or something. Sometimes when you feel torn within yourself in two different directions, try to find out which one is the important one, and try to test that. The younger you are, when you sort of stretch yourself, the better, I would say, because in my age, it's really hard to change your whole internal universe. Not that I'm not working on myself still, I am definitely. But of course, I am
What are the
struggling.
biggest areas you still work on, Thomas? You said as a younger man you felt you talked too much and you didn't listen. What are the areas that you continue to work on to this day?
On me, you want me to tell you? Well, that is actually my green side, because I have no green in me whatsoever. I have 2% green, and which is too little. It's too little. So I'm struggling with, I need to sort of turn the active listener switch on. I'm not saying in this, I'm an excellent coach, an excellent mentor, but I have to be in the mode. I have to be in the zone to do it. So I switch it on, and then I'm with you 100%. But up and running, I tend to forget about asking people about their weekend and how's your cat, and I heard your father was ill and how's it going. I sort of kind of, oh no, forgot about that, which is very, very non-charming, and I'm not proud of it. So I'm still struggling. I know it, but I tend to forget about it because my green bar is, you hardly can see it. That's one thing that I am working on constantly, to remind myself, not with everybody, not with the blues and not with the reds, because they just get confused. That's none of your business. Why are you asking me about my wife? None of your business. Stay away from her, Oh, sorry, I heard she was hopping on a career, I'm sorry. But to the green ones and the yellow ones, because they want
to hear it.
Some interest in there as people. So I try to do that. But still, I'm struggling with that. That's one example.
I think that self-awareness is absolutely massive. How prone do you think people are to being manipulative when they have this data? Because I know one of your follow-up books was surrounded by psychopaths, and that probably plays into that a little bit.
Well, I actually wrote Surrounded by Psychopaths, which is about manipulation. And then I had to find a catchy title to that one as well. But it is about psychopaths, but it's mostly about how to not be manipulated based on who you are. Because I received more than just a very few emails from people saying, okay, the 4 colors are interesting. Now tell me, how can I learn this in order to use other people? And first I thought it was some sort of a writing error, but it came back. And somebody came up to me after a lecture saying, I want to use this on people. Okay, well, what do you really mean? And then I realized people would like to use this knowledge, these insights, in order to actually sort of push people around a little bit. And then I realized, that's really bad. That's not my intention at all. So then I started to investigate manipulation techniques. And the problem with Surrounded by Psychopaths, and it's a huge problem, and I'm aware of it, in order to make people protect themselves, to teach people how to protect themselves from manipulation, I have to teach them manipulation techniques so they can recognize them. But of course, some people will use it and misuse it. I completely understand that. I don't know how to deal with it. That happens with, people used another tool, the Big Five tool, in order to, create a whole mess around Brexit. Just an example, or the Trump election, they used the Big Five, another more advanced, more precise personality assessment. So they used it to manipulate Facebook for people, and all that you heard about Cambridge Analytica. So you can use everything in a bad way. That's not about the tool in itself. It's about who you are. If you are a manipulative person, you will go about and find some way to manipulate people. It's like people saying, when you get money, I'm going to change. No, you're going to be more of who you are before. If you're a jerk, and
that's very interesting.
Well, it is. If you're an idiot and then you win the lottery, then you're just a rich idiot. You have to work on yourself before you can sort of do the best thing you can do and sort of present yourself to the world in a normal and positive and let's say fruitful way to be beneficial for everybody else, which I think we have to do. We have to take some responsibility, and some people are not responsible. They are there for themselves. So it's not a majority. It's 1, 2, maybe 3% of the population who always will try to, good for you, what's in it for me, and they will try to sort it out and make themselves look better, and they are there.
How a tool is used that is given to us, I think, is one of the most important points that you've made, Thomas, because you could use this book and this personality profiles and understanding your drivers better to increase your self-awareness, which I certainly feel I have. Equally, I know that I've adapted and moved my style a little bit with different customers to secure a sale, which could be considered manipulative, or it could be considered being a better employee or a better manager or account executive for my client, because I'm speaking to them in a way that they would like me to speak to them and dealing with them in a way they would like to speak to them. However, the extreme end of that is turning up to an extent where I'm using it to manipulate somebody to behave in a way that I want them to. And it's there's I don't think it's a fine line. I think it's quite a thick line, but certainly people could overstep that mark and go to the extremes.
Obviously. Just one to point one thing out, which you touched upon here. If you talk about sales, a lot of people find sales representatives manipulative because they try to make me buy. But that they're in the business to make a sale. They're here to sell you something. If you don't want it, leave the room. But we know this. It's one way if you try to sell a used car and you're a car dealer. I know that's sort of the game in here. But if he brings out his own personal old rusty, whatever it is, say, this is the best we have here. Take this one for a lot of money, that's manipulation. You shouldn't do that. That's bad. And most of us know the difference. We know when we are stepping over that thin or thick line, but of course, you have to balance this. But again, if you're a good person, you will not misuse this kind of knowledge. And I think it's worth the risk. I think the upside is much bigger than the downside. Totally. Yeah. That's my experience anyway.
Certainly. I certainly think so. In an ideal world, Thomas, if you were to think about the impact of your work surrounded by idiots, surrounded by psychopaths, even your thrillers as well, what impact would you want it to make?
Oh, huge question. I have this sort of a romantic, cliche-ish kind of way of looking at this, and that goes something like this. I don't think, according to my own beliefs, we cannot get away from all the conflicts in the world. There will be conflicts in the relationship between two people. If it's a work relationship, or if it's a romantic one, or if it's within your family or whatever, how you deal with conflicts will always be crucial. The more you understand about you, the more you understand about the other party, you can deal with the conflicts and you can learn something from them. It can be beneficial for both of you. I like to use my knowledge and my experience to decrease the number of unnecessary conflicts based on miscommunication and misunderstandings. Again, we can't lose all the conflicts, but we can sort of minimize the unnecessary ones. That is kind of my mission, and help people to realize I am not surrounded by idiots. I am actually only surrounded by people that I don't yet understand fully. I think that's a good news, because when I get feedback from Ireland or from Iceland, for that matter, Canada, India, Australia, Azerbaijan. I got an email yesterday morning from Azerbaijan, of all places. And people are saying Malaysia, Korea, South Africa last week. People tell me the same thing over and over. That is so true. I am yellow, or I am blue, or I am this, and my husband or my boss or my colleagues are like this. And they have exactly the identical reflections. When I know this, now I realize it's not such a big issue. I only need to listen more or present myself a little bit better, or so on. Because people are struggling with exactly the same challenges all over the planet, because people are the same. The cultures vary, yes, they do, but the similarities are massive. I mean, there's a huge possibility to decrease the stupid, unnecessary conflicts just because you think you're surrounded by, well, call it whatever, lunatics or just crazy people, because you're not. And we are all, that's my mission, and we are all the idiots in somebody's story.
Yes,
Right.
Thomas, what a beautiful, noble note for us to end on. And I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I'm sure the listeners have as well. If they'd like to continue the conversation with you, where should they head towards?
Surroundedbyidiots.com. There you find me and everything that I have to offer.
Perfect. That'll be linked in the show notes, guys. Thank you very much for joining me, Thomas. And thank you to you, the listener, for tuning in as always. And I'll be back to speak to you all again very